And while he was there in Benin in West Africa, he was in Peace Corps and then stayed there a little longer. But he was in a village for at least 2 years without any electricity. So Sam was using kerosene,
Yep.
and his neighbor's son was burned in a kerosene accident.
Oh,
He had tipped the lantern over, was totally burned, and ended up surviving, but took months to recover. Very painful, obviously. And Sam, realized that this is insanity. I mean, at that time, and when we started in 2007, there was 1.6 billion people, no electricity, who were using kerosene as their primary source of light.
yep.
And this is insane. It's the 21st century. We should be able to do something about it.
Hello, I'm Sumit Bose, founder of Future Net Zero. We are a website that produces content to help you cut your carbon footprint. And the Net Hero podcast is all about that, highlighting people doing amazing things to cut emissions, be that scientists, business people, inventors, or just common, ordinary people who are doing something to make a change. If you want to get involved, then email us. And we're looking for a sponsor for this amazing podcast. So if you'd like to know more, get in touch. On to this week's episode. I've always had a problem with what we do with net zero because it seems often it's really something for the developed world. That doesn't mean that the world isn't changing and shifting, but the real problem with all our plans and goals for net zero is affordability. I went to COP a few years ago in Glasgow and I met loads of people from developing nations, and they were the ones who actually seemed more keen on it than anyone here because it affects them more closely. Climate change is really affecting lots of nations. But the problem they had was that a lot of things that was promised, and we still know that haven't been delivered, were unaffordable. You can't just expect countries to suddenly decarbonize like that. So how do we make sure that this just transition, which I've always been very keen on, is one that can apply globally? Well, there's a company that's pretty big in Africa that's been doing just that for more than a decade. The company's called d.light. They basically make solar products across the board. And its ethos is to try and bring the whole area of kind of clean, you could call it clean lighting, clean energy, to people who are normally in those parts of the world burning kerosene. I'm delighted to say the man who set it up, or one of the people who set it up, joins me today from Nairobi. Nedjip Tozun, hello, how are you?
I'm great. Thanks so much for having me.
No,
Great to be here.
I love it. And how is Nairobi right now? Must be nice and warm. It's pretty cold here.
No, it's great. The temperature in Nairobi, because it's by the equator, but high elevation, so the
Mm-hmm.
temperature is nice the whole year round. So it's in the, it's like around 25 degrees
Oh,
for British listeners, like mid 70s for you Americans, so
uh,
it's nice pretty much all the time. So that's what it is right now. I'm looking out onto a lot of green outside there.
don't tell me there's a couple of zebras going past, a small elephant, just
I don't see any
nudging
right now,
them.
but maybe later.
You set this up, I think, when you were a student, is that right? Or just finishing
Yeah.
uni? So give us a little backstory to what d.light is, because you're from California, correct?
Yeah.
In fact, I think you're from where Apple and all that lot are. Is it called
Silicon
Palo?
Valley.
Yeah, Palo
I grew
Alto. Is
up.
that right?
South Bay. So San Jose, I grew up but Silicon Valley. So in the heart of, all this tech innovation.
So, okay, you're a tech nerd. I love it. It's brilliant. You've got this great idea. Why the hell did you want to try and bring this stuff to Africa? Give us the background to how d.light came about.
Yeah. So, I have been an entrepreneur, really interested in technology. So d.light started when we were in business school. So I had a little time between undergrad and business school, and really found that passion for entrepreneurship. But I realized that I wanted to kind of apply those things, the power of technology and capitalism and technology. Those are things I was really passionate about, but wanted to apply it to something that would really make the world better in a meaningful way. So yes, I grew up in Silicon Valley, but my dad immigrated from Northern Cyprus. So my name, Nedjip, it's kind of a odd name for someone, growing up in the US. It's a Turkish name. And, I had a chance as a kid every other summer or so to go to Northern Cyprus, visit my
Ah,
family,
okay.
and spend a lot of time there. And it's a beautiful place, wonderful culture. And, the infrastructure was not the same.
Of
Silicon
course.
Valley, power would be out some of the time, water wouldn't always work, weren't the same kind of opportunities for people. So I had that kind of sense of contrast, growing
Yeah,
up. And that made a deep
totally get
impression
it.
on
Yeah.
me. And I wanted to do something about it. It always seemed unfair to me. And I went to business school to do that, to figure out like, how do I do something with a social impact? So this idea of social enterprise was really kind of new at the time and very exciting to me. So that's where I met my business partner, and his name's Sam Goldman, also an American guy, but grew up basically in India, Pakistan, parts of Africa,
Oh,
Peru. His
wow.
parents were development.
Okay.
So one
Right.
of these third culture kids. And he actually spent 4 years living in Benin. And while he was there in Benin in West Africa, he was in Peace Corps and then stayed there a little longer. But he was in a village for at least 2 years without any electricity. So Sam was using kerosene,
Yep.
and his neighbor's son was burned in a kerosene accident. The
Oh,
kid tipped the lantern over, was totally burned, and ended up surviving, but took months to recover. Very painful, obviously. And Sam, realized that this is insanity. I mean, at that time, and when we started in 2007, there was 1.6 billion people, no electricity, who are using kerosene as their primary source of light.
yep.
And this is insane. It's the 21st century. We should be able to do something about it. So he and I kind of teamed up. And by the time we finished up business school, we had sort of some early prototypes of a solar lantern that could replace kerosene. That was our first product. And we thought if we get it the right price, make it super affordable, it'll kind of kill kerosene. That was our goal. We wanted to get 100 million people off of kerosene by 2020. So with that in mind, we had a little bit of seed money that we were able to raise. And then Sam moved to India, which was our first market where we started selling. And I moved to China, which was where we initially built the products.
Right.
So it was a wild adventure. And that's
I was
how
going
we
to
started.
say.
And the company's evolved a lot since then, but that's our origin story.
So the idea, and I get it, he travels around, and my family, a bit like you, I grew up going to India, so I'm used to, not now, but definitely when I used to visit in the 70s and 80s, they used to call it load shedding, power cuts regularly, people having generators. You go out of the cities, and exactly what you said, people are using hurricane lamps and kerosene lamps and all that. Why did you guys think about solar? Because there are other ways to get around this issue. What triggered you? Was it just because you knew about that field, or just because you saw there was a potential with solar? Because it's kind of, can put it into, a calculator. You can see how it might work. Was that a
Yeah.
technology you thought that's the best thing we can try and develop to
You
try and
know,
counteract the kerosene thing?
Yeah, it's a great question. We didn't initially start even thinking solar would be the solution. We were looking
Right.
at, because there were these guys who would, let's say, charge phones. They would run a generator, charge
Yeah, yeah,
phones
yeah.
on the generator. Said maybe we can make something that charges really fast in that network so people can bring the lights. We were open to what it might be,
Right.
but we were seeing kind of, for one thing, the cost of getting a solar solution was actually pretty affordable. And it just seemed to be the solution that could work everywhere. You didn't need an established network. You didn't need a grid nearby. This could work anywhere. And we saw all the trends for solar, the costs were going down. It was just clear that was going to be the solution that could scale. There's a lot of innovation happening, even with battery technology. So everything
Yeah.
seemed to be moving in that direction. So after kind of doing that research, talking with a lot of customers, we really are very passionate about this human-centered design, going out to the field, iterating the product design with customers. It was very clear solar was a way for our customers to own their own power, and it just was something that was clear was going to scale. So that's what we picked.
Let's go and talk about the people, because this is really what it's about, which I said right in the intro. I believe in net zero. I wouldn't run something called future net zero if I didn't. But my issue with net zero is that people do get left behind. And the issue that governments have in the places that you operate, particularly in Africa, but right throughout the world in developing nations, is they've got a lot of things to balance, right? They've got to give security. We all know what's going on right now in the world. They've got to have health. Yeah, they've got to make sure there's some basic infrastructure in terms of transport. And so the thing about kind of bringing people to give them the grid, to give them electricity, often it's difficult, it's hard, it costs a lot. Have you sort of, and I don't want to force you into a sort of confrontational thing, but have you had to bypass or have you worked with governments in the places you've gone and they've accepted that? Because that's another thing. People don't kind of like other people going, hey, I can help your poor people. Look at this. So how did you navigate that to begin with?
Yeah, I mean, the way we think about it is, we want to make a product that is really exciting and compelling for the customer, that
Yeah,
doesn't require subsidy, doesn't require government intervention.
smart one. Yeah.
Yeah, what we need from the government is just not to be well, I'll put it this way. What we need is to be put on an even playing field with the alternatives.
Gotcha.
So, hopefully kerosene and diesel aren't subsidized. In some markets it is.
Yeah.
But if we're kind of at a level playing field with kerosene and diesel, we win. Like in the way we design our products, the way we really drive the affordability. And as we've gotten into these bigger solar home systems, because lanterns was just the beginning, and we did, by the way, hit that goal. We got 100 million people off kerosene. Now it's
Brilliant.
175 million. I mean, these lanterns are everywhere, but that's just the first step. Obviously, light is, I mean, it's transformational. Don't get me wrong, but that's just the first step. And ultimately, for these customers who don't have the grid's not coming anytime soon. We want to be able to get them a bigger system that can run appliances and really enable them to have a life that's like what we have when we have electricity, even if the grid's not coming.
Yeah.
And to do that, we finance the product. So basically, we have the customer can pay 20 cents a day or 30, 40, 50 cents a day, depending on the product offering. And they're paying via mobile money because there is a mobile money infrastructure.
Yes.
And then we can remotely lock or unlock the product based on if the customer's paid. And but everything we do, the costs are designed so it's less than the cost of the alternative of what diesel would cost, what kerosene would cost. And because of that, we don't necessarily need government subsidy. If we had government subsidy, and sometimes those subsidies come in certain markets, we can grow the market. We can reach even more people. So it's a kind of an accelerator, but it's not a necessity for us because that puts us in a harder position.
Correct.
So we see it a lot like the mobile phone industry. The governments honestly welcome it because it's bringing business, bringing employment, and we don't need their money.
So you didn't find much resistance from people saying,
no,
hey,
it's helping them achieve a social good, and it's creating business and employment in their country. So it's a win-win in that sense, and we're not asking for a handout from the government. We're trying to really make sure it's something priced so it's affordable and their citizens are better off as a result of these products being there.
Let's talk about some of the things. So lamps, everyone can understand that, solar lamps. You talked earlier before we started recording about, you called it a home system. And then you stunned me that you make TVs that now have solar panels or whatever. I don't know whether
among other things. That's right.
Right. So explain what you're doing. So everyone can get a lamp, right? We've all seen them. Maybe you got one in your garage. You just have a solar lamp and you hang it, and it's brilliant.
Like this guy that for those not listening and watching, there's there
you go. Like that guy. There you go.
I always have to have one with me. So it's like
excellent. You got one there.
Yeah.
What are these home systems? What are you talking about?
Okay. So basically, you have to first envision these are homes that don't have any fixed appliances in the home. Okay. These are homes that are totally off grid. Now, so it's not just enough you can't just give a solar panel and a battery. I mean, that's not, these TVs are very expensive in the market, or the fans or the radios. These things are expensive, and lights, oftentimes they're very inefficient too, and would drain the batteries really fast. So what we kind of learned very quickly is customers, they didn't see us as a solar company. Even when we were doing lanterns, they saw us as a company bringing light and then bringing mobile phone charging. Because that's, then we had products that charge phones. And then as we got into bigger systems, and when I say that, it's like a bigger panel you might put on your roof, have a charging pack and with the battery inside. And then we have a bundle of, let's say, lights that go with it. Most of our systems will come with lights, including tube lights or a security light you can put outside with switches on the wall. So it feels like you're connected to it feels like you're connected to the grid, even though you're not. And then we have appliances that go along with it too. And this really came from our customers, where we would go to them and, they're not asking for 100-watt panel or whatever, but they said, when can you bring the TVs, or when can you bring the fans? And, that's the pull comes from them. So with the TVs, to really make a cost optimized total system, you have to really have a TV, for one thing, that can run efficiently off solar. So we have DC TVs, so they run off of DC electricity, which is what panels produce, rather than having an AC to DC conversion, which is not power efficient.
So you don't have the transformer. Okay, gotcha, right.
We don't need that. And that also removes cost from the thing. And then we can also optimize the product for being pay-as-you-go finance. So we can remotely lock and unlock even the TV because we work with the TV manufacturer to put in this pay-as-you-go technology. So now instead of paying however many dollars up front for TV, they can now pay that 40 cents a day or 50 cents a day, and then they can own TV.
As they watch. Got it. Yeah.
And that is, hugely exciting.
So you're actually working with manufacturers, or you're making these as so you're making DC products like a DC fridge, a DC
Yeah.
telly, a fan.
Exactly, exactly. And we work with the manufacturers, and we're not experts necessarily in
No, I was going
R&D
to say,
on
yeah,
TVs. We can work with them to say, here's the specification our customers need. I mean, we get into the weeds of the contrast ratios and all this kind of stuff to optimize the energy, optimize the user experience, and then and optimize the cost for them so they can have an experience that they can love and that they can ultimately afford, and that we can finance because we do the pay-go locking integration inside the devices. We're even doing financing now of phones because we can put in locking mechanisms in the smartphones. So customers who wanted to upgrade to a smartphone to be more connected to the world, we can offer that to our customers too. So really we become kind of, you can think of it like we started as a product company. Then we built a last mile distribution business that reached these customers in deep rural areas and communities, to provide servicing to these kinds of products, and then ultimately became a consumer finance business because to make this kind of transformation with these types of products, you have to finance them to customers who are very low income. They
yeah,
might
of
be able to
course.
afford the product if you can spread the payments out, but they can't afford it if it's cash up front, for these kinds of products. And the beautiful thing at the end is that they can own it.
Yeah, just to get you on that point, people always talk about, and I think most of your stuff is Africa. Correct me if it's wrong. Where are you mainly working?
Yeah, we work across sub-Saharan Africa and India, but
Right,
sub-Saharan Africa is kind of the largest driver of the
right.
business.
So I've done some stuff around that, stories around that, and there is this thing with, I don't know, I make up the term anyway. I'll use it. It's my term, but a technology jump, right? So before you'd put in telephone lines to give you the
Yeah,
internet, and then you'd have to dig the hole and do that. And you go to parts of Africa, and I've seen stuff around there where they just put up a repeater tower, and then it's going digital straight away to another one,
right.
and then there's a hub. So in a way, can you integrate with that? Because that's the real part of the connectivity. It's all very well having a lamp and a TV and all that,
Mhm.
but you've got to receive something. And the old days having an aerial, that's all gone. So even satellite dishes are gone. So everyone's kind of, using internet as a platform for everything. Is that another thing you've seen change since 2007?
Oh yeah, for sure. And I think what's so amazing about working in Africa is that, I mean, yes, you don't have all the existing infrastructure
No.
necessarily, but it also provides this opportunity to leapfrog and actually
Yes.
go
Yeah.
something better and faster. You saw this with mobile phones skipping landlines. No one got a
Yep.
landline. Everyone
No.
writes to mobile phones. No one banking, same thing. People didn't have banking, but they went to mobile money, before we
Yep.
did, in the US. And I seen that with energy too, where the grid's not there. So people
Mm.
are leapfrogging to these decentralized solutions. And now you're seeing people in the US and Europe want to own their own power and have be
Mm.
able to control
Well, they're
it.
doing it
And
themselves already in Africa.
and they're
Yeah.
leading the way now, here. So I think the lack of that legacy infrastructure, while has been a challenge, also kind of creates an opportunity to do it better and in a fully renewable way. And what I think is really interesting, because we have a lot of customers now who are actually who have a grid connection, but they choose to disconnect it and go with these solar systems because the utility bill comes in. They don't understand why they're getting charged so much. And then when they have a solar home system, it can run all the same things, and they can own it. And once they pay it off, it's theirs. There's no utility bills that come in after that. And that's something that people, I mean, they love that sense of ownership. It's literally empowering.
Yeah, you don't think about that. Exactly. You've got your power, it's clean. The actual basic setup, just so that viewers and listeners can understand, I assume it's a solar panel and a battery pack that you then spur off, correct?
That's right. That's right.
Two quick questions. How expensive is that at the beginning? And B, who the hell puts it in? Because there's been a lot of stories here in the UK about dodgy solar panel fitters. So who's
Yeah.
setting them up for them? Do you have a team? Or do you
Yeah.
guys, how do you do it?
Yeah, so we have, I mean, tens of thousands of these sales agents who go out into these communities. They do the installation. They also assess the credit risk and all this kind of stuff because we're doing financing, not just the product side. So it's very kind of unusual in that sense because we're both like a product business and like a fintech business. And
Yeah.
those things kind of go hand in hand because the product has to work well for the customer to keep paying. So we have to do a good job on the product, not on the installation, on the servicing, but also have to do a good job on selling the right product to the right customer, making sure they can afford the product that we're selling them. So we have these, people that we train up in the communities that can do the
Right.
installation,
Okay.
and then they can engage with the customer. And yeah, and basically they're designed rather than sort of like bits and bobs. It's not like a solar panel here, a battery here. It's a fully integrated branded kit that is sort of has a locking.
So what, you just screw it in and that's it, sort of thing.
Yeah, it's very, very simple. Like the panel, it's very simple to install on the roof. And the battery pack, I mean, it's portable, and very simple to use. A lot of our customers even self-install. They choose to do
Oh
that because
wow.
it is quite
Okay.
simple.
Yeah.
There's no technical sort of, especially for our smaller systems. I mean, it's really plug and play, and we designed it that way so it could scale. I mean, everything we think about is like, how do we do this at scale, in these, hard to reach communities?
Let's talk about the crux of all of this. This is great, lovely story, but it's got to make a difference to people's lives. Now, you said that you've done an amazing thing, which is take about 175 million people off kerosene. Are they using solar for cooking? That's my first question. And
Yeah,
B,
yeah.
how are you getting these people to let go of something that they've seen as very reliable? Do you know what I mean? There's always a reticence with technology. People have it all the time here. I'm not getting that update on my iPhone because I know it's going to be crap. So,
Right.
you know, generations have used kerosene, diesel generators, all of that. How have you found that attitudinal shift?
Here's what's interesting, because we thought about that at the beginning, and we thought there would be
Mm,
this resistance. And there at first was a resistance to like, does this work? I mean,
of course.
customers have been
Yeah.
screwed by stuff,
Yeah.
junk that breaks, so there's a skepticism at the beginning.
And it's even more important for them. For us, it's an inconvenience. For those sort of
Right.
people, it's life or death. It's really important.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's a big investment for them. Even a $5 product or $10,
Yeah.
big investment. So, that we saw that kind of resistance at the beginning when sort
Right.
of it was I would say unproven. They didn't see anyone else in their village who had this product. We're over that hump now, but that was at the beginning. But I can tell you, there's no one who said I prefer kerosene. I mean, people actually really they hated using kerosene,
I bet. Of course, it stinks.
which is interesting. And
Yeah.
when they got this product, it was, so that we didn't have that level of resistance for solar lighting. I would say for cooking, it's a very interesting area. And it's actually an area I'm
Mm.
very passionate about as well. And that we're doing some interesting work in.
So are you building electric cookers then, powered off this?
Okay, so yes, on the cooking, what we started with are very efficient biomass stoves that kind of
Ah,
have almost no emission
gotcha.
versus the existing biomass stoves, which create huge indoor air pollution, terrible health impacts. So just by kind of putting these clean cook stoves in these communities, you offset almost, a ton or 2 tons of carbon per year that would otherwise be emitted, plus the health impacts. And the way you cook the food, the taste of the food, everything is the same. So that works well as long as you get the price right. And for a cook stove, we can't really make it pay as you go affordably because it's the kind of device it is. So there, we're very reliant on the carbon markets actually, because it offsets a lot of carbon. What we've done is get into carbon financing deals where we essentially pre-sell the offsets of the carbon. We use that to subsidize the price. And if you can get to like less than $10 or so, because otherwise it'd be $30, $40 for these
It's
efficient,
too much. Yeah.
technologies, then it just moves. So we've sold hundreds of thousands of these. And actually our only limit is the carbon financing deals. It's not the demand in the market and the impacts. I mean, the stories I've heard from customers are amazing in terms of, kids that had asthma goes away because, they're not breathing in all the smoke,
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
huge impacts just for health and even like the time collecting wood and all this stuff. I mean, they don't have to, it consumes so much less fuel that they free up income and time because they're not consuming as much. Now there is, as you were kind of alluding to, that's sort of a first step, but there are electric cookers, that we are starting to actually pilot and roll out.
Hmm.
That's harder to make affordable because it's not just about the cooker, but you need enough power to actually power the cooker. And that's something that consumes a lot of
Yeah. And that's a lot of power. Yeah.
energy, is actually just
Yeah.
creating heat. So that's hard to make super efficient. But it's an area that we're definitely looking at, especially for customers who have at least some grid. That's an easy one. And then making a solar one affordable is something that we're still trying to crack.
The average customer, how would you describe them? Are they living in a completely cut off village or are they in towns that have got some power? What are you getting?
It's we work with a whole range, but I would say the kind of primary customer, if I had to pick sort of one, archetype, would be a rural customer living in a village. They might be in a village with 100, 200 other people. And, there's different levels of density of the villages depending on the country. But there's no power line, or they might see a power line in the distance, but it's not connected to the village. And they're just off grid. And that's kind of the market we're designing for. There are markets that are kind of in towns that
Yeah,
we
gotcha.
serve too. I mean, we kind of serve the spectrum, but we've really designed.
You went for that, Mark. Yeah. Okay. Water is a vital thing, and pumping water is a very expensive thing. And we've seen over the decades lots of great projects around the world to get water to people who are kind of off grid. Have you explored any of that using kind of your solar power technology? Great, enough electricity to pump and bring clean water to these people.
We've looked at it, and I think, with what I would say is we found it's hard to make like a water pump, which is often used for ag and these small plot holders. It's a very different kind of distribution channel, servicing channel. So it doesn't leverage sort of the distribution we already have, which is really geared to these households. And water, it's a very complex ecosystem.
Of course.
And there are organizations that are, addressing that and doing that well. So I think it's one of those where if there's a way we can help or be helpful in that process, we're happy to. But there's so much to do just around energy and sort of, getting the home powered and there are sort of needs for farmers for their field. There's need for some kind of businesses to run mills. And we haven't really gone into those because there's just so much to do just specifically with the households. That's where we focused.
Do you see yourselves as a kind of grid light? Terrible phrase, but you know what I mean? You're basically grid in a battery.
Yeah, I think increasingly we are, as our products kind of generate more and more power and we're able to do more and more things. It is providing experience that's like the grid. And I don't want to say it's completely the same as the grid, because there are some things like an iron, let's say, to iron your clothes, things like that, that would just, consume a lot of the battery very quickly.
Of course, straight away, yeah. Kettles, yeah, absolutely.
Exactly. But there are a lot of things that we can do, including now we're starting to pilot refrigeration,
Yeah.
that can be done through solar, and that range of things keeps increasing. So I think over time we're getting closer and closer to a grid-like experience. And for many of these customers, we're kind of hitting all the kind of initial appliances they would want with the grid to start with. So it's sort of going from zero to like a huge leap up that's, transforming their quality of life. And that's what we do. And we hope to continue to kind of migrate them along that ladder up.
I mean, look, I hadn't heard of you before, and you said you're very big in Africa. Is this an issue that, there's companies like you and loads of others doing great stuff, lots of companies from African companies who are doing things. I've spoken, did a podcast about Africa a few years ago, and there seems to be this kind of, all the conversation, G7, the COPs and all that. It's all kind of developed nations, all of this. And frankly, there's a lot of bullshit going on as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you feel slightly indignant that the people who kind of will be need it the most, right? We've got still people who haven't got clean water on this planet, which is just ridiculous. Yeah. That sort of voice isn't being heard enough in the net zero debate. I'd just be like, it's interested to hear your thoughts because you've been working there for a good decade. Or maybe I'll get it wrong. I don't know.
No, I think it does make us a little indignant. I mean, I think we're sort of fired up by a bit of a sense of injustice in it. And you look at sort of the investments in renewables, there's a lot of investments going into,
Yeah,
honestly, Asia, Europe, the Americas, but very, very little going into Africa. It's like,
spot
5,
on.
6%.
Spot on.
But you look at Africa, the population is 1.4 billion today. It's going to be 2.5 billion by 2050. You have about half the population today with zero electricity access, but all these people are going to get energy access. I mean, they should. And the question is, how will they get it? And if we care about getting to net zero, we have to address Africa and these populations. Or, I mean, is the assumption that all these people are just going to be left off the grid and not part of, modern life? And that's not right. And we can't do that. But there doesn't seem to be real investment or time, spent thinking about how are we going to bring, this population, rather than going through the fossil fuel, burning, can we leapfrog them to something better and then let them enjoy the same quality of life we get to enjoy? And I think there's not enough dollars going into it. There's a World Bank program that just started that's allocating $5 billion for off-grid development in Africa. We'll see how that develops. And that's encouraging. But, I think that's really just a start. And when you compare with, how many billions have been spent in, developed markets to develop their grid initially, to subsidize the grid and now move to renewables. I mean, which would be amazing if that materializes, because before it's pretty much been almost nothing. But that's even a drop in the bucket, that 5 billion. So, but anyway, I do think they're starting to get attention around it, but it feels too slow to me. And, it does feel aggravating at times.
I don't blame you. Well, listen, it's been a pleasure talking to you. I think you're doing a brilliant job. D.light, it's called. What's the website?
It's d.light.com, D-L-I-G-H-T.com.
Check it out. I think it's brilliant work you're doing there, Nedjip. And I think, if you look at one of the things that I think is very important in this podcast, it's different voices bringing different things. So maybe we'll have you back again with one of the villages. If we could do that, that would be brilliant to see how they are living with this, because I do think that's it's a vital part of where we're going. We've got to take everyone with us. Brilliant work you're doing at d.light. Thanks very much for joining us on the Net Hero podcast.
All right. Thank you so much.
What do you think of that? Let us know, viewers and listeners. A brilliant work there by d.light. We've got to look at the people around the world who haven't got that access to the grid. Are we leaving them behind? Get in touch on social media. Drop me a line. And if you want to be on the Net Hero podcast, email nethero@futurenetzero.com. See you soon.
You've just heard the Net Hero podcast from futurenetzero.com. Join us as we help you find ways to cut your carbon footprint as we head towards net zero. Subscribe and follow us on social media. futurenetzero.com. Better business, better planet.